Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. We blapping, we guamming. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. the Raven. That is TopLobsta.
It's too early for that.
The father of disinformation. It's never too early to be blapping. Maybe a little too early to be guamming, but here at NDS, we like to live on the edge. Before we get started, this show is going to stream in its entirety because Fridays are for the Lord, and we're back with Ed Mabrie. But I want to tell you guys where you can support us. Patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad is where you can do it. All kinds of perks there, early access to episodes, ad-free viewing and listening experiences, early dibs on tickets to Bohemian Grove. We're looking at the first week of March, that Friday and Saturday. I haven't looked at the dates, but that's what we're doing. We're organized. I've been thinking a lot about it all morning, and yesterday I was putting some thought in how we want to organize this thing.
Doing a lot of thinking, huh?
A lot of thinking, a lot of big thoughts happening around Bohemian Grove. Ed Mabrie is with us. He's going to be there. And one more thing, don't forget, discount codes off merchandise from TopLobsta.com. I have this OG long sleeve logo on, and I don't think we sell these anymore. This is like
that's a what do we call that? An artifact.
It's an artifact. Dang, dude. Oh, you got the Mother Horse Eyes t-shirt. I didn't know where you were going with that, bro. You're just like full screen, taking my shirt off.
Mother Horse Eyes. Shout out to Creepy Pastas. Let's get into, we don't have that much time with Ed today, so let's get into it. Here
Ed Mabrie joins us once again. Ed, I got to say, the amount of feedback that we got from the last episode that we did with you with Matt, of the Standard Coffee Shop. We're actually here once again in the Standard Coffee Shop. Matt has started doing Straight Bible, and that crossover with you and him was everything that the fans wanted. We got such positive feedback, so it's great to have you back. Before we get into really important questions, you know, where can people find you?
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on again. So you can find me on my my legacy site, which is faithbyreason.net. Hundreds of hours of material there. I also have the membership side of that. You can get the entire Revelation series there, the Genesis series, and 501c3, so you can possibly get some tax benefits. Talk to your advisor. There are discounts on books, and of course my Patreon, which is where I'm most active. It's where I'm interacting with folks. You get bonus episodes. You get first content drops there first. Uploading the Revelation series to that, Genesis series, doing bonus episodes, Q&As, and you can be part of the Bible study. We're actually almost at the end of the year-long Bible study. We're actually going to be wrapping up the church age. Then we'll get Revelation, and then we'll start it all over next year. So those are all recorded. You can come and pick up on those, or because we also do a live Q&A afterwards, and you can then get started with us again in February. Wow. Oh, and one other thing, because I know we have another episode we're doing in a couple weeks with my friend John Linhart and Jason. Yes. And we're going to talk more about this. John and I will talk about this more then, but we're doing a spiritual warfare class. We're going to start that early next year. It's going to be pretty deep curriculum. It's going to be videos, going to be written material, and then live sessions, because I've been getting just a ton of interest. People saying, they feel like they're under spiritual attack, spiritual oppression. And I get that all the time. So I think, I think it's time to do a course to teach people how to effectively do spiritual warfare. So, yeah.
That's huge. It's one of the things I really like about your Patreon is there's a lot of solutions, and there's a lot of talk about, important questions. And on the topic of questions, by the way, we'll probably be taking some fan questions by the end of this episode. So if you have any, drop them in the chat. We'll hold on to them. We got a couple in the backlog, but your Patreon is a great place for tools, how to navigate spiritual warfare, things of that nature. I recommend people go over there. I'm not going to say too much on it. You did have a talk recently, is masturbation a sin? Right off the bat, you opened it in a really compelling way, and it turns out to be a fascinating topic that is, pretty nuanced. It's not a straightforward answer. You actually open it up with, it depends. So, a little bit of a spoiler alert there. I highly recommend people go and check it out because you're answering important questions. I kind of want to start this one off with something that you also talked about on your Patreon, given that today is October 31st. Mm-hmm. It's Halloween, and I believe you actually answered the question on your Patreon. Is it all right for Christians to celebrate Halloween? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
I actually dropped that, yesterday for my Patreon, so I'm happy to talk about it here as well. Though you can get obviously more detail on the Patreon, but I'm happy to touch on it because it's a sensitive topic. It's just like the masturbation topic. Maybe we'll talk about that in an upcoming episode, because it's one of those things where it just seems like there's this kind of dividing line of, who are you hurting when you do, again, not just masturbation, but with Halloween, and are you committing a sin? Because the Bible is very clear that you should not worship other gods, other Elohim. You should not get involved in what we call the occult, Satanism. Especially in the Old Testament, it's God's pretty clear that, don't get involved in witchcraft, those sorts of things. So should we do it? So just like the masturbation question, it comes down, it really depends, because there's a difference between celebrating Halloween and observing it. And I think that's really where that line of demarcation is. So when it comes to, let's just talk about some of the reasons why people, say it's wrong. And again, it's because it's the celebration is called, or the holiday, for lack of a better term, is called All Hallows Eve. It is a pagan holiday. It's considered the holiest, or more accurately, the unholiest day or night of the year. It's when, according to legend, it's when the veil is the thinnest between our realm and the quote unquote spiritual realm. A lot of rituals happen. A lot of witchcraft is going on. There are all kinds of legends that we've kind of taken and put into our culture. Like, the jack-o'-lantern was actually, in medieval times, it wasn't actually a pumpkin, it was a turnip. So I don't know how they found a turnip big enough to put a light into, but you would do that, and it was a night when supposedly demons would roam the earth, and they would come to your door, and you have to give them something to make them go away, which is where the trick-or-treat aspect came. When you go to a house and say trick-or-treat, what you're really emulating is when a demonic entity would come to someone's house, and you have to give them a gift in order to make them go away. So there are all kinds of legends around it, and some churches are very strict and say you absolutely should not do Halloween, and you also shouldn't watch Harry Potter movies because that's witchcraft. So they're very much stay away from anything that has to do with the occult. And then there are others who are like, yeah, it's fine. Or they'll have like what they call a harvest festival. They'll have all the kids come to church and they'll give them candy there, so you aren't out trick-or-treating. And when I was growing up, they would have all these. I grew up during the Satanic Panic era. When I was a little kid, that was happening. And there are all these crazy stories about people putting poison in the candy and razor blades and apples and things like that. So should we celebrate Halloween? Again, so the difference is celebration versus observing. If you observe something, that means you're participating in the ritual. You are actually doing the paganistic rituals. You're doing the witchcraft. You are intentionally celebrating or invoking these evil spirits and doing all these demonic things. Then they're celebrating something. Well, it's more of a party. It's just you're taking advantage of festivities. So should Christians celebrate Halloween? Celebrating it, I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating it. Why? Because you're not taking it seriously. It's really about your intention. That's what it really comes down to. A lot of times we as human beings and churches, we put certain restrictions on people that God doesn't, because we were trying to, that's what religion is. Religion is basically trying to improve on what God did. It's saying, God, you said this, but I'm going to put something on top of it to make it even more difficult. So look, God, I improved on your plan. I mean, the first religious act, we've talked about this before, was with Eve. When the Nakash, the so-called serpent in the Garden of Eden, asked her a question. He just said, hey, did God say that you can't eat of any of the fruit of the tree? And she says, well, we can eat of all the fruit, but we can't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we can't touch it or we'll die. Well, God never said don't touch it. He said don't eat it. But what Eve put on top of that was, well, if I don't touch it, then I definitely can't eat it. So look, God, I improved on your plan. But that showed her religious pride, and that showed the Nakash, Satan, that, okay, she has a weakness here in pride. She wants to be like God. So I'll say, hey, if you eat this fruit, you will be like God. You'll be like the gods, like the Elohim. So the point is that religion does that. It's when people put extra restrictions on that God didn't. And it always leads to trouble, because it's going to lead to extra rebellion, because what God says, his law is going to be perfect. And when you add to it, you've corrupted it. So many churches will say, you have to stay away from anything. But God says God sees what's in your heart, and he knows your intention. And if your intention is not to worship evil, then you're not worshiping evil, even if you get into the practice of it. And I know some people are going to balk at that and say, "Oh no, you're being too liberal with it." Well, what I did in my video, I kind of transposed it. Let's put it the other way around. Let's look at a so-called Christian holy day, which is Christmas. Christmas. Jesus wasn't born on December 25th, and there's paganistic stuff with Christmas. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it is just a pure holy day. And when you are observing Christmas as a Christian, what are you observing? The birth of Jesus. The coming of the Messiah, one of the greatest event in human history, salvation, all those great things. So you're thinking about it, you're meditating on it, you're giving thanks for it, and you're thinking about Jesus and you're observing it. How many people do you think in this country, in the world, are actually doing that on Christmas? Not many. Most people are just celebrating Christmas. I gave an example in my video. I have a neighbor who is an atheist, and I have many in my neighborhood because I live in a very progressive part of the country. But she's not only an atheist, she is a pagan. She, by her own admission, she says she's a pagan. But every Christmas, her house is full of Christmas decorations. There's a Christmas tree on the front yard. There's all the lights around the house and all those sorts of things because she said Christmas is her favorite holiday. She's not a Christian. She's not observing it, but she's celebrating it. Why? Because it's fun. It's, she thinks about, joy and gift giving and hanging out with your family and friends and going to parties. Christmas is basically a secular celebration, even though it is a quote unquote religious holiday. Celebrating Christmas does not make her a Christian. She's not observing the Christian precepts. Halloween is the same way. You can celebrate it. You can dress up in a goofy costume. You can go to a party and drink from a punch bowl that they put some dry ice in it, so it has like little foggy thing coming out of it, so it looks like a witch's brew. You do this sort of thing. Are you actually honoring Satan? Are you doing rituals? No, you're just goofing around, taking your kids door to door in costumes to get some candy.
Here's the thing, though.
Go ahead.
Because I've went back and forth in my life about this where I'm like, well, I'm not actually observing it, to looking at it and going, there's something a little bit nefarious about what they're doing. But especially after talking with Paul Stobbs, where he makes the example of these ancient tribes and they're dressing up the way the entity or demon, whatever, would present itself. So they'd represent it themselves in that same way in order to evoke it. And then they do evoke that spirit.
He says, dress like what you want to be possessed by.
Right. And then that gets into my kid dressed as Spider-Man the other day, and then we're thinking about
you want to be possessed by Spider-Man.
The Nephilim nature of some of these superheroes.
True.
And the thing is, a lot of people don't know. Most people don't know. We're walking around and we're talking to people, and if we tell them that, they'll be like, what do you mean? But I've gone down that rabbit hole, and I've looked at that, and I've seen it, and I know it's true. So for me, I feel like if I know that is then true and then I still partake in it, there is a bit of knowing and there's a little bit more, is more of a bit of participation on my part. Does that make any sense?
Even I think I'm sorry, Ed, but just to kind of give the counter to that, I think intent is really important. So when you have these tribes and all these, pagan tribal kind of areas, and they're doing these dances around fire, and they're ingesting psychedelics, and they're dressing like the entity that they're trying to evoke or be possessed by, there's a direct intent there. That's the thing that they're trying to do, whereas your child's not trying to be possessed by the spirit of Spider-Man.
That's why I let him do it. But for me, I'm like, I just feel like if I already know some of these things more intrinsically, that's going to already be in my head. Yeah. And then how much of that is compliance or agreement with whatever we're doing?
It's a fair question, yeah.
It is actually a good point. So, and I actually didn't go down that road before in my video. So this would be a new territory. I think there is a line where you can only pretend so far. For example, if you want to mess with a Ouija board as part of your Halloween celebration, that's a problem. Why? Because that is intentionally doing something that is occultic. That's when it draws a line. But this year, our family thing, we do a family theme every year when we go trick-or-treat. And that's all we do. We go around our neighborhood and we get candy from our neighbors and we come back home. That's it. And this year we're doing a Star Wars theme. So, my youngest son says he wants to be a stormtrooper. So I said, okay, we'll do a Star Wars theme. He's going to be a stormtrooper. My oldest is going to be Darth Vader. My wife's Princess Leia, and I'm going to be Luke Skywalker. And I got to show you a picture when I have my blonde wig on.
No, send it with the Jerry curls.
I'll have to send them. Well, actually,
by the way, hold on. I gotta let the chat know that before the show started, it has been revealed to us that Ed Mabrie used to sport a very admirable Jerry curl back in the day, and we were told that we might receive some pictures. So look forward to a new set of T-shirts coming out.
It might be a new set of T-shirts. Yeah, I looked a lot like Ice Cube in the NWA days when I had my Jerry curl. I had
so cool. I say bring it back.
Yeah, it came down to the neck, and the front had little spit curl happening in the front too. It was all good. No, I'm not kidding. I will find a picture.
You got to find it. You got to bring it back. You know,
But-
and I just want to
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
too, because you're talking about that Star Wars thing. Right now my son is out at school. He's dressed as Captain America. So my line in it is like, you're not going to dress like a monster. I don't like the monster thing, especially when they're really little. Look, if you become a teenager or whatever, and you're going to go and do this thing, and you know we all go through our fallings. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to advise against it. I'm going to explain why. But you know, your journey's your journey, and we all have to, I think, come to God. If you try to force people, it puts a bad taste in their mouth, and they tend to recoil. So, but while he is a child, there's no dressing up like a monster, dude.
My mother did that to me. She's like, well, this is of the occult. And I think, she's kind of right. There are things happening. This is a spiritually strong day. The veil is specifically weak.
And I want to talk about that too.
And people are doing that. But when you say that to me, I'm going to be like, sounds like nonsense.
Yeah.
And then go the other way, which I did for many years.
No, I totally get it. And so that's why I want to give this I'll give out a few caveats, because while I said it's okay to celebrate it, I also gave some reasons why you should not celebrate it if you're a Christian and deal with it at all. And I kind of couched it in what the Apostle Paul said about, I think it was in Corinthians, I could be wrong, but he would talk about a stumbling block. And you don't want to be a stumbling block to yourself or to anyone else. And the example Paul gave was about eating meat sacrificed to idols. Now, that is one of the two things that the early church said that Gentiles should not do. They said, don't commit fornication, which is a sexual act with a spiritual connotation as part of worshiping other gods, and don't eat meat sacrificed to idols, because that was idolatry. It was a ritual where you would put meat in front of this statue of the idol and you would do rituals over it. And part of it, you would eat the meat, and that was basically taking that entity into yourself. But then Paul said he would eat the meat that was sacrificed to idols because he wasn't participating in the ritual. To him, it was just meat. These things had no power over him. Paul had the Holy Spirit in him, as all Christians do. And that means they had no power over him. So to him, he was like, I'm hungry. There's some meat here. These people are just put it there. I'm going to eat it, because he wasn't participating in the ritual. But he said he wouldn't do it in front of new Christians because it would be a stumbling block to them. Because let's say you were a first century Christian, you had just come out of paganism, which they all were. There were really virtually no atheists back then. You believed in some type of God or gods. And if a young Christian who just came out of paganism and said, and was told not to worship idols, and they see this elder of the church, this great apostle, eating it, they say, well, wait a minute, maybe it's not so bad to do that. And he says, so Paul says, I can do it, but I'm not going to, because it would be a stumbling block to others who look up to me. So one reason not to do it is if it's a stumbling block to yourself. So if anyone's watching right now and they're really in violent disagreement with what I just said, don't celebrate Halloween, because it's a stumbling block to you. It's something that's going to negatively affect you. So don't do it. So that's, if you're in a community or a church that is very strict about it, and you may say, you know what, you guys are going overboard, I'm going to celebrate it anyway. Maybe it's a good idea not to do that, because then people in your church are going to see you doing it. It's going to cause contention, and it's not worth it, because it could be a stumbling block to others. So, and another really good reason not to celebrate Halloween is if you are a new Christian and you came out of the occult. So I've had some folks on Patreon tell me that, they became a Christian fairly recently and they were really involved in the New Age and things like that beforehand. They should not. Why? Because they're still in the process of being cleansed from all of that. And it could be triggering to do anything that's anywhere close. It's like an alcoholic. If you give up, if you start becoming sober and you give up alcoholism, well, you shouldn't go to a bar, for a while, because it's going to trigger you. But I have a friend who is a recovering alcoholic. He's been recovering for 20 years. So, and it's perfectly fine for him to go into a bar. I drink it. I have a glass of wine or something in front of him, and it doesn't bother him. Why? Because he's matured through it. He still doesn't drink, but he's matured to the point where it's not triggering for him to see alcohol or smell it or be around people who are drinking. He just knows, I'm not going to do it. And it's the same thing if you are just freshly out of the occult, paganism, New Age stuff, then you probably shouldn't, because it could be triggering for you. And you wait until you've been completely cleansed and you've matured more. And then if you want to, do it. But it's not something you have to do. Once my kids are old enough that they don't want to go trick-or-treating anymore, I'm not going to do anything, because I'm doing it for them. Honestly, from the time I was a teenager until I had kids, I didn't really do anything for Halloween, not because I was for it or against it, just had no appeal to me.
Yeah, there's I guess I'll say it, but so if we were gonna go trick or treating with the kids. I don't think we have any plans for that, but I'd be like, yeah, okay, it's fine. Let them get the candy. But there was like a party that's lined up for sometime this weekend, and my wife is like, let's go, and I'm like, let's not. I like the person, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's a weird invitation for. It's for me. I'm like, that's a little bit too much.
Well, I hear what you're saying. There's actually like a dialing up of
malevolence.
In a way, right? So
we're
picture
adding
this,
alcohol.
right?
You're adding
There's gonna spirits, right? You're adding spirits.
There's gonna be like some sort of sexual element because the girls just can't control themselves.
They have to dress that way.
And I'm like,
what does women just say? Always, what is it? The nurse, the slutty nurse, or the cat? Those are the two.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Honestly,
leopard print.
It's become anything but showing your tits. Also,
pretty much. Yeah.
Like maybe not. I don't want to really be around. It's not because I'm gonna like out of fornicate or
no, but I don't
want to be next to that.
The imagery in my mind and all that other kind of crap too. So
I don't appreciate that. I will say to the woman that watched the show,
the women who watched the show,
don't do that to me,
dude. The woman.
I don't appreciate the attempt. It's just the thing of like, stop doing that to guys. You're hijacking men's
psychology.
Yeah, but I mean, their primal instincts. That's really what you're doing.
But they would go like, learn to control yourself if you can't see boobies without getting, and it's like, all right, yeah, so.
Don't do that to people. It's not
thousands
a nice
of years of reproduction and
I don't know.
Development.
You know what?
Well, hold on. I
want to talk about that when we get to, when we do the show on the masturbation thing, because there's this thing, and again, women, you're fantastic. We love you. You're wonderful. You're God's gift. Right. However, I have to do the caveat. However, there's sometimes they get a little holier than thou thing, especially when it comes to pornography. Yeah. And this is just, I'll give you a 1 minute preview of one thing I talk about, because, when masturbation is tied to pornography in many instances, because we're visual. That's how we're attracted to visual. That's why when you show your boobies, like, control yourself. Well, it's different for you. Yes, of course, women like to see a good looking guy, but it doesn't have the same effect. When a woman sees a naked man, it is not nearly the same effect as when a man sees a naked woman. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, if you ever want to see a difference, if you have the opportunity or you see it on a movie or something, look at how men act in a strip club versus how women act in a male strip club. Women, it's a party to them. They're just like, oh, this is crazy. This is goofy. They're just having fun. Men at a strip club look like a lion staring down a group of gazelles. It is you
have to actively, like, as a dude, you got to be like,
there is no community.
Stop looking at that, like, in your mind, and like,
there's no
away.
Community in a strip club for men. Everyone is like in there. It's a weird thing. Everyone's in their own zone.
I've never been to
but for women, they're all like you see like the woo, doing their thing. It's fun, but guys are like locked in, not good.
Yeah, women seeing a naked man it's funny most of the time because it's just goofy. But women have their own form of pornography, because it's easy for them to shake their finger at men and say, "Oh, you're looking at that nasty stuff on the screen," and because it's an actual sexual act happening.
Yeah.
However, women have their own thing that appeals to them, and it's really a lot of these romance novels and these romantic
Minotaur romance novels.
It does the same thing. What is pornography for a man? It's a fantasy of someone who you want to be involved with who is not your spouse. What are these romance? 50 Shades of Grey, these movies, what are they? They were an unrealistic fantasy of a person who you get aroused by, who is not your spouse. That it's the same thing. And it's unrealistic. Nobody looks like a porn star. Even porn stars wake up in the morning. They don't look like porn stars in the morning. They have puffy eyes and makeup's not on and their hairs are messed up. That's not realistic. Just like these men in these romance movies are not realistic. Nobody looks like Ryan Gosling all the time. No one has a 6-pack ab and $1 million business and is tough but kind. No, that's not realistic.
Yeah. Isn't the dichotomy hilarious? Like the guys, when they watch it, they're in the dark place. They're like, don't look at me. And the girls are like reading it.
Yeah, they're in like in a robe. They're comfy, cozy.
Like you're laying right next to me reading this stuff. What are you doing?
Why is there a minotaur on the cover? Number one, I'd never been to a strip club, because even when I was younger, I was like, I'm never, like, the idea of paying somebody to pretend they like me was crazy, and the idea of hanging out in the same room as my homies who were all erect was also crazy.
Oh, stop it.
That's wild.
But Ed's not really helping this show. He's trying.
He's trying, but we keep just slipping. So
no, it's true. I feel like you have to say it though.
Yeah. What are we doing here? We're all hanging out in this room together. You're erect. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So okay.
Glommed up.
You're talking
so
about.
the whole point of that is, ladies,
okay,
don't do that on Halloween. And if you're gonna do it, then
Don't go to strip
get mad
clubs
if
on
guys are
Halloween.
gonna stare at you.
Yeah, dude. Well, that's what they want. So
go ahead.
Top is talking about this party, and like, it's an additional layer of putting your energy and focus into this thing. And that's a really important thing I'd like to discuss is the energy of it all, right? You mentioned before it's like the fall equinox, it's harvest season. We've done some research on a lot of these like rituals and everything. They take place during the.
I'll tell you a little bit more about the family off air.
Okay.
But,
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So these rituals, these pagan rituals, they often take place during harvest season, right? And there's like kind of a reason for that. Like you're doing this so that you have a good harvest next season, kind of a deal. You have the harvest moon, and that plays a role in it. All in the thinning of the veil. Now, think about this. When we were younger, ABC Fox Family, they used to do like 30 days of Halloween, and they would play all these like Halloween movies, and they were rather innocuous, right? You're talking about like children's movies like Casper, The Friendly Ghost, and things like that. Mm-hmm. But what happens, we're talking about the vibe, right? The energy. For a month, you're priming your house, let's say. You're decorating it in this kind of spooky way. Every night when the sun goes down, and the sun goes down early in the fall, you're gathering together and you're watching these spooky movies. So every night you're setting this vibe. Every night you're sort of darkening the spiritual energy of your household. And then it all culminates in this one big moment where everybody dresses in a certain way and goes and starts knocking on doors, knocking on thresholds. Like that's a weird thing, right? The vampire principle of a thing has to knock and ask for permission to come in. There are a lot of weird principles, and I wonder at what point, if any point, intent doesn't necessarily have to be there because you're setting the mood to such a degree, and you've been doing it for 30 days that you're at least thinning the veil in your own home.
Something even crazier too is like as you knock on their threshold and they go trick or treat, and then then they give you like poison.
Hell yeah!
Like it's pretty established.
It's
that,
poison poison now.
Oh, it's the best. I'm gonna eat it.
Well,
I like when you go to the
sponsor.
houses and they have a turkey baster filled with red dye 40, and you go step right up, kids,
and they just drip
right into your mouth.
Red 40, and they're like, "There's some hormone disruptor for you."
Yeah,
and for you.
Little soy, give that little boy breast.
Strange, just super strange, man.
But what do you think about that, Ed? I mean, the lead up to Halloween, the setting of the low vibrational spiritual ambiance in your own household. Fear, a little dose of fear every night. 30 days of Halloween. We're watching these spooky movies every night. And for 30 days, you're geared towards that aspect of the spiritual realm.
What bugs me out, too, is the decorating part of it. And in tandem, you'll go to Home Depot, and you'll see, like, a huge decapitated person, and he's like, like shaking.
12-foot tall skeleton.
And then a 15-foot tall Santa. And I'm just like, these things.
Weird.
So, you guys have a good point. And one of my old mentors I mentioned before, Dr. Chuck Missler, who passed away a few years ago, he disagreed with me on this. And by the way, if you disagree with me on this, I'm not going to fight you. Like I said, if it's a stumbling block, don't do it. But he came out with a video and an audio series called Halloween Invitation to the Occult. And what he said, and I understand why he was saying this, and I get it, because I think you're kind of saying the same thing, Raven, is that it may not be your intent to do it, but you're starting down a path that could end that way. Again, you start with something that seems innocuous, like a horror movie, which I don't watch because we don't watch it in our home. Not because I'm afraid of them. I just think they're goofy. I mean, they're always like, "There's a noise upstairs. Just go check it out." Like, no, if there's a noise upstairs, I'm leaving. What? It's like, I don't know. It's the old. You've seen the probably the jokes about how if there were horror movies with black people, they'd be 5 minutes long because we don't go towards danger. We're like, we have enough of this in our real life.
These horror movies have to take place in like the Northeast where people don't have guns, because not once do you see anybody ever investigate a house like with their shotgun. Like you hear a noise downstairs. Like if I hear a noise, I have my shotgun. My shotgun has a flashlight on it. I'm walking around the house, even if it's a small noise, just because, I'm a psychopath. Nobody ever does that. It would be over really quickly, I think, if that happened. It's a different type of energy. Nobody ever has a gun in these horror movies.
Richard Pryor, my favorite comedian of all time, he had a bit on the what was it? I think it was the Amityville Horror House. It was really big in this movie in the 70s. Yeah. Where he said it would have been 5 minutes long if it was black people, because as soon as the house said hello, he said goodbye.
Exactly.
But the point is that you watch those kinds of movies, and that could lead to and some of them will have seances in them and like Blair Witch kind of stuff, which that's probably the last. Let you know how old I am and how when the last time I watched a horror movie, that might have been the last one I watched, because I was working at a company where we watched it as like as during our lunch break for Halloween, and I'm like, that movie freaked me out because
It's a scary movie.
It really was. But you get into that, the seances and things like that, and you say, okay, well, this movie is harmless. Well, maybe doing a Ouija board is harmless, or maybe doing all these different occultic things. So yes, you can absolutely go down that road, but that's what I'm talking about with intent.
Yeah.
At some point, you do intentionally do something. But that's why our responsibility, if you're a mature Christian, to know where that line is. And my line, again, is going to get candy. I don't go to parties where people are, only if they have sour Skittles. That's the only one I'll eat. And I know it's unhealthy for me, but I'm addicted to sour candy. So then the sour Skittles are, if a house does not have sour Skittles, we don't go there next year.
Oh my God. I just, I like the seriousness that you said. I didn't feel like that there was any sarcasm detected. There was no it was just like, yeah, dude, I don't do that unless you have sour Skittles. That's it. But like other than that,
like when
I don't do that.
To Bohemian Grove, if there's not sour Skittles there, I'm going to
leave.
Plane back.
Ed goes and knocks on the door, and he doesnn't say trick or treat. He says sour Skittles. If they say no, he just walks away.
I will also accept Sour Patch Kids, and all the Airheads, whatever the sour candy is. I'm
big into chocolate. That's my thing. I don't do the sour candies. I don't do the fruity candies, but chocolate is a real problem for me. And my kid doesn't like chocolate, so he'll come back with a sack, and I'll just separate all of it. Snickers, Milky Way, that's all mine. He's like, good riddance. I'm like, that's awesome, man. It's like having a small slave that collects candy for you.
It is awesome. Except if somebody has candy corn, I swear I will try to have God send a curse to your home if you give me candy corn.
Candy corn. So, of course you like candy corn, dude. You are a candy corn ass motherfucker. Dude, that is so disappointing.
The language.
I'm sorry. I stopped myself.
It has an interesting thing. I like the 3 colors, and
I don't think they taste different though.
They don't.
I've tried. I've bit the white part off, then the orange part, and then the yellow part, and I've found that's all the same flavor, dude.
Yes, but psychologically.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, yes, you can go down that road. And I've known people who have. I have a friend of mine who, she's a Christian, but she was kind of dabbling in some of the whole, the universe is blah blah blah, that sort of thing. And when she had one of her aunt died, she actually went to a medium because she went to speak to her aunt. I'm like, you're going too far down the road. I think I've told you guys before that like my favorite city to visit, I do it almost yearly, is New Orleans. Love New Orleans.
Yeah, it's a cool place, except for the human dookie.
Well, there's that. Well, you just stay off of Bourbon Street. I mean, we don't even. I mean, that's you do that when you're younger. We usually stay in the Garden District or someplace like that, and we didn't even go down.
What I love is I said human dookie, and he knew what street it was on.
Yeah,
dude, it is. That's exactly where it was.
Ed,
you do Mardi Gras once, and then that's all you have to do it. But my point is, it's a very occultic city. And you just know to stay away from that kind of stuff. I don't go into, there's all these little witchcraft shops and things like that. And most of it is just hokey. It's not real, but some of them are real. I went into one of them with that same friend. She and I went, and she was trying, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend, and she wanted to get back together with him. And so she went to this person who said that she would cast a love spell. And I'm like, sweetheart, that's not cool. But she was an actual witch. So they do have that. And like, that's where you have to start to draw the line. That's where it takes maturity. So as I said, if it's a stumbling block, don't do it. But my whole point in this is not to tell you how to behave. My point is that you shouldn't feel guilty about getting some candy with your kids. You shouldn't feel guilty about an office party where you guys, dress up like the Incredibles or whatever you're going to do. Don't feel guilty about it, because a lot of people use guilt to try to enslave you. And don't ask what's acceptable for man, ask what's acceptable to God. And God does not want you to go down that road of, going into the occult. But if you're just having a little fun and you're not going down the road of the occult, I don't want you to be in the bondage of unnecessary guilt. We have a lot of things that we should feel guilt about, but that should come from the Holy Spirit. And remember, it's funny because I had another question on my Patreon before about how to hear from God. And it's a whole thing. And it'll be part of my spiritual warfare class. The difference between hearing from God versus hearing from another entity, because they will all speak to you spiritually. The difference in the voice is that when you hear from God, it's not loud. Elijah said this. He said, I saw a whirlwind, but God was not in the whirlwind. There was an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. But then I heard a still small voice, and that's where God was. God does not shout at you. The Spirit of God will not yell at you. He will not oppress you. It will be a still small voice. It will be that little thing at you. When you do something wrong, you get that little feeling, that's not right. It's not yelling at you. When you feel guilt and oppression, that's not from God. Not that you won't feel guilty, but I mean, when it's like really loud, when it's really oppressive, God doesn't, that's not how he communicates. So just know that if you're told that if you feel guilty because you dressed up in a well, not in the sexy nurse costume, but if you just, dressed up in like a
regular guilty. If you're a sexy nurse out there, you should feel guilty.
It's probably not coming from God.
Yeah.
But you should be sensitive towards it.
Ed, this is kind of like a good segue. The previous thing you said, we had some questions from you last weekend. I was looking through some of them, and the first one here that stood out was a question to you from John. He says, I'd love to know Ed's take on Saul consulting a medium to speak to the spirit of Samuel in 1 Samuel 28. I go back and forth on what's actually going on and what Saul is actually speaking to. I think he's talking about the Witch of Endor.
Yes. Before you answer that, Ed, I just want to say to the audience, a little divided right now, 75 versus 25. 75 in favor of no, 75% in favor of no. Should Christians celebrate Halloween? If you guys are listening, we're doing a live poll on YouTube. Dangerous Retard's very staunch on not celebrating Halloween. So I'll let that poll go for the rest of it. But yeah, that's an interesting topic. What do you think about that, Ed?
If you don't want to celebrate it, then don't. You don't have to.
I mean on the Witch of Endor situation.
Oh, okay. Well, what's the poll? I'm going to say I'm not going to disagree with you 75%. Don't do it. Absolutely not. If you don't want to celebrate it, you don't have to. There's nothing that says you have to celebrate it. But what I'm telling you is that if you do want to go trick-or-treating with your kids, it's not a sin. But you don't have to. You don't have to celebrate Arbor Day if you don't want to. But what I'm saying is that for those who feel oppressed by it and feel this guilt, and am I doing something wrong with my kids by dressing them up like Spider-Man and Captain America and going to it? That's not a sin. It really isn't. Okay, but the Witch of Endor, that's a good one because that's a question that I had in the past. So, was it really the spirit of Samuel? And I believe it was. And so what was happening here was that Samuel had been basically Saul's spiritual consultant because Samuel was a prophet. He was actually the last judge because before the Israelites wanted a king, God gave them judges to judge them. But that doesn't mean like a judge in the sense of what we have in courts. It was a judge is basically a leader, a temporary leader that when they had tough times they would rely on the judge, and the judge would help them and lead them. But the goal was for God to be their king. God didn't want them to have a physical king over them because, and this is really important, and I have this on my faithbyreason.net site. If you go to the category of human government, which I really explain the whole purpose of human government, and the definition of a king is not a ruler. A king is supposed to be temporary. A king should only rule during times of war. That is the purpose of a king. A king is to be over people during the time of war. When there's not a war, the people do not need a king. And if you look in the Bible, they only had a king because they kept requesting it of God. And why did they make Saul their first king? Because Saul was unusually tall. Why did that matter? Because who were their enemies? Their enemies were the Nephilim, those Nephilim tribes that they didn't drive out where they were supposed to. So they wanted a king who was tall, who was going to lead them in battle to fight the Nephilim who were tall. Goliath, for example. And remember, Saul chickened out and he had to have little David fight the Nephilim Goliath for him. So, and David was a king ordained by God. Why? Because David's job was to wipe out the Philistines. And once he did that, he was that should have been the end. Then he should have been a leader, not a king. And when did David get in trouble? With Bathsheba, when he was not on the battlefield, when he actually stayed back, and then he saw her, bathing on the top, on a rooftop, and like a man, we just talked about this before. He saw a naked woman and boing, and off he goes, and he gets in trouble because he wasn't doing his job of a king. Solomon he was made king, and he never had a battle. What happened to Saul? Solomon fell away. He married all these women who turned his heart from the Lord, and all sorts of things. So that's the whole thing with kings. So with Saul, Samuel was the judge. Then he was Saul's advisor. Saul was just supposed to do what David did Saul's job, but Saul was supposed to wipe them out. But Saul was actually a coward. And when Samuel died, Saul should have been relying on God, but he didn't. And so he went to this medium to get the spirit of Saul so that he could get that advice again. That was not God's will. And the reason why I believe it was really Saul, why it was really Samuel, was because the witch at Endor was surprised. She was a charlatan. She was a fake. She was not real. She was going to do what most of these people in these seances do. They just pretend, or they speak with the familiar spirit of the person. She was shocked when Samuel showed up, meaning that this was unexpected. It was actually Samuel, and God was speaking to him through Samuel. And what Samuel said to him was that he basically cursed him. And this was God doing this through Samuel. Samuel was like, why are you bothering me? I'm in paradise now. I don't want to be here anymore. So God sent me here to speak to you. So that gives us a couple of interesting principles. One is that apparently it is possible for a person who is dead, if God allows it, to come back and speak to someone. But it seems to be unusual. But it's not going to be done through an occultist. So what do we do with that? I know it's the only example of it in the Bible, but again, remember, the Bible is not just a comprehensive history book. It's really telling you Jehovah's story, and it's giving you his precepts and principles so that you know who he is. So yeah, can someone speak from the dead? Apparently, but anytime that happens, you have to look at it from the standpoint of what Jehovah is allowing, and that would be something that's going to be in line with his will. Another example of that is when Jesus told the story, which was not a parable. It was a story of Lazarus and the rich man, not the Lazarus he raised from the dead, but the story was about, there was the rich man, and there was Lazarus, who was a beggar, and he would, sit at the rich man's gate and beg for food, and the rich man would send his dogs after Lazarus. But eventually this Lazarus died, and he went to, and the reason we know it's not a parable is because these are people who have names. No one in the other parables, Jesus never gives anyone's names because they're just examples. I believe this was a real. So he went to paradise, Abraham's bosom, which is where the righteous dead would go before Jesus' death and resurrection. Well, now if you're righteous and dead, you go directly to heaven. And then you had the other compartment of Hades, which was torment. And they were speaking to each other. So when you're dead, you still have consciousness. And the rich man told Abraham, he said, can you go tell my brothers to get their lives together so they don't end up here? And Abraham talked to him and said, hey, they have the prophet. Your brothers have the prophets. They have the scriptures. If they don't believe that, they're not going to believe me. Meaning that Abraham didn't say, because I can't do it. He said, well, because it's not going to help them. So if someone does, so it appears to be, and this is controversial, but there appears to be the possibility that someone can speak to people who are alive from the place of the dead. But it looks like, if you look at the example of Abraham and this rich man, only that the rich man can't do it, apparently. So if you are evil dead, not the movie Evil Dead, but if you are a dead person and you are in torment in Hades, you can't come back and speak to people, because the rich man couldn't do it. If he could, he would have. So it appears that only God has the power to allow someone to do that in the case of Samuel, and in the case of Abraham, if that request was going to be honored. Abraham didn't say he couldn't, he just said he wouldn't. So that said, if you do believe that someone is speaking to you from the dead, first of all, they would have to be among the righteous dead, and secondly, they would only say something in line with the will of God. If those circumstances aren't there, then I would highly doubt that if that's really that person.
It almost seems like the difference between you forcing a thing and God sending someone.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
I've had people tell me, and again, I don't, that they've had dreams. And again, I can't say it's happened or not because I don't know the person's dream, but they said they dreamed of one of their dead relatives who came back and gave them advice, and it was good advice, and they followed it, and good things happened.
I've also heard stories of people who were visited by loved ones who passed away that they were very close with, and then over time, these visitations continued, and as they continued, they got stranger and stranger until eventually this thing revealed itself to not actually, to be masquerading as their loved one. Mm-hmm. So that's really the issue too, is like these spirits have the ability to masquerade.
They do.
They can come to you as a loved one. So, that's, I think, a huge gamble when you're somebody who thinks they have the ability to communicate with deceased loved ones, you don't really know what you're communicating with. And I think just by the nature of communicating with something spiritual, you let your guard down. You just go, this is amazing. Must be real. Must be truthful. Right. Must be honestly what it's claiming to be. And it's like just the wildness of having that interaction. It's like people don't even ask that question. Like, how do I know that this isn't something? And I've heard enough stories where that thing goes south and it turns out not to be grandma, let's say. And then what? You've been entertaining or communicating with, strengthening the bond between you and some negative spiritual entity, some sort of demon or something like that. So, best to let God send them.
Right. Yeah. The Apostle Paul said, verbatim, he says, don't believe every spirit, but discern the spirits. So he's acknowledging that spirits are going to speak to you. But he says you need to know the discernment. And the discernment is no one from God is ever going to contradict God. No one from God is ever going to say anything that goes against the will of God, which is why it's so important in that discernment to know the will of God, to know the character of God. And I mean, that's the whole purpose of my Bible study, is just to help people know who God is and who he isn't, and what his will is, so that when you are confronted spiritually, you know, hey, that's not God, because this isn't in his character, this isn't in his will. But in order to do that, you have to know what his will is. You have to know what his purpose is. And if you don't, then you can be fooled.
Something even more tricky is, like, I think when God talks to you, it's not, I'm sure he's being specific, but maybe we're just too dumb to perceive it. So, like, not just hearing, but also understanding exactly what it is you're supposed to do. Like, I don't know, I think we were supposed to do this thing in the coffee shop, had that inclination, ended up at the wrong coffee shop.
Yeah.
Really weird. In retrospect, thinking about it, and I was like, I was close. But no, not that.
Almost,
not
but not
specific.
Quite.
Not specific.
Yeah.
We
this
actually,
is such a wild question.
We have a couple of questions. This one pertains to another one. Super chat here. Ed, do you think baptism is necessary? If so, could you baptize me at Bro Grove?
Oh my God!
Shout out to
baptisms
LexCorp.
at Bro Grove. This
Wow.
is what's happening here.
Also, so first of all, I'd be honored to. I have to bring my swim trunks. But do that. So, is baptism necessary? Is it necessary for salvation? If that's the question, the answer is no. It's not necessary for salvation. What baptism is, it is an outward sign to others that of your dedication. But it doesn't have to be baptized. You don't have to be baptized in order to be saved. How do we know that? Well, among other things, the thief on the cross. Jesus told him, "This day you will be with me in paradise." Well, he didn't get baptized. You're saved by believing. And I know that goes against a lot of Catholicism, where they do infant baptism, which it doesn't harm anything. There's nothing harmful about it, but it's not. You're not saved by someone sprinkling water on you.
That's actually in the that's this question here in Patreon. They're asking about infant baptism and standing or running water, but please continue.
God wants you to accept Jesus by your free will. You can't baptize someone and force them to be a Christian. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people, a lot of quote unquote Catholic folk think that they are saved because they got water sprinkled on them when they were a baby and they don't have to do anything else, or they can just, participate in the rituals and whatnot. No, you have to accept it. The Bible, Paul is abundantly clear, and it really amazes me that people keep wanting to add things or take away from it. Jesus said, Paul said, if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. And there's a period at the end of that sentence. Getting baptized is an outward display. You are basically saying, I'm joining this tribe. I'm joining the Christian tribe. And baptism is a symbol of you dying to your old self and coming back as a new creation. And the reason people do it is because we know that just as human beings are, the way our psychology works, when you participate in something, when you believe something and then you do something physical on top of it, it reinforces it. So now your unconscious mind, which you talk about with John Lenhart all the time, when you do something and then you do an action and attach to it, then it strengthens it. But it doesn't mean you're saved by doing that. You actually get baptized after you're saved.
That's what I'm wondering, Ed. So it seems like so in Orthodox Christianity, exorcism is a part of baptism, and repentance is a part of baptism. So in that way that you're renouncing Satan, it's also a renunciation of your own sin. So it's sort of like I would agree with you, right? Like, yeah, you get saved before you get baptized. Baptized is the outward expression of what's in your heart. It's this declaration, like you talk about often. When you speak a thing, it happens in the spiritual realm, and then its effects start to slowly happen in the physical realm. So if you're getting baptized and you're renouncing your own sin and making a declaration of Jesus Christ being your Lord and Savior, asking Holy Spirit to fill you, and then this is like almost like it feels like an announcement in the spiritual realm, like declaring your position in things and your alignment with Christ. And so in that way, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a necessary part, but it does seem like an important spiritual step.
It is. And it's important to do. I mean, I was baptized after I became saved as a child. I mean, but it was my decision. It didn't happen when I was a baby. I had to be old enough to make that decision. And remember, it's John the Baptist, the most famous baptizing person who ever existed. He and Jesus both said that, yeah, I baptize you with water, but Jesus says, you will be baptized with me. You're baptized by the Holy Spirit and by fire. So what was happening with the baptism that John the Baptist was doing, which was, again, before Jesus' death and resurrection, it was symbolic. It was like all the Jewish feasts, which are basically a dress rehearsal. They were rehearsing what the first and second advent of Jesus. So, doing the Passover feast didn't save you. It was just symbolizing that, you're sacrificing a lamb without spot or blemish, which is what Jesus was. Jesus is, was our sacrificial lamb. And when Jesus came, he did the real thing. Which John the Baptist was doing baptism before Jesus came around. And then after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension, the disciples were baptized by the Holy Spirit. That's the true baptism. And that happens when you are saved. And the symbology of baptism is, again, you're going in the water, you're dying to your old self, and you're coming back, a new creature. Well, what the Holy Spirit does, his fire kills the old man and it gives you a new heart. And you can do a baptism when you are saved, you're baptized by the Holy Spirit. You can do a water baptism after that. Sure, it's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a good thing, and you can get baptized. And it's something that just reinforces what's already happened.
Okay.
Publicly.
Excellent.
So it's like marriage. My wife and I, we got probably the same thing with you. You go to get a marriage license and you sign it. Well, technically, that's done. What's the ceremony? The ceremony is you standing up in front of your friends and family and declaring that in front of a preacher or whatever, and you're declaring that you are eternally bonded. But legally, it's signing a piece of paper that makes you married.
In a way, I'd say the latter is more important, though.
I agree. I agree with that. But I'm saying legally, according to the state, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. All right, we had another question here. This is a good one.
Okay.
So, Il Didamondo asks, why are there two different genealogy accounts for Joseph's lineage? The book of Matthew and Luke have Joseph's dads as two different people, both descending from King David. Was one of them wrong, or did he have two dads? I don't think that's the case. I'm not familiar at all with this.
That's a great question. So, and it's a really cool answer. I mean, the reason for it, not my answer, but the reason for it is actually really cool. So in Matthew, you have the genealogy that goes from Joseph and his father all the way to David. In Luke, you have the genealogy going from a father figure all the way back to Adam. What's the reason behind that? Matthew was a Levite. The book of Matthew was technically written not just to the Jews. Obviously, we can all use it, but it was written to convince the Jews of who Jesus was. That's why you see throughout Matthew, every time Jesus does something, there'll be a commentary right after that says he did this in order to fulfill this part of the scripture. For example, when King Herod tried to ordered that all the newborn boys under the age of 2 would be killed, and an angel and an Elohim, a good Elohim, came to Mary and Joseph and said, take Jesus to Egypt. And they did that. And then Matthew says, this is so it could be fulfilled, that where it says that out of Egypt I brought my son. So he was Matthew was using the scriptures to verify that Jesus was the promised Messiah. And the promised Messiah would have to be the son of David, from the royal line of David. That's why it goes from Joseph, his legal father, to David, who, it doesn't go any further than that, because he had to be a descendant of King David, of the royal line. Here's a problem. David's one of his great grandsons, great grandson of King Solomon, was a king by the name of Jeconiah or Jehoiakim. There's two different pronunciations of his name in the Book of Kings. He was so wicked that God placed a blood curse on him and said that no, because you were so bad, none of your descendants will ever prosper and be king. So wait a minute, how could Jesus legally be king and be of that royal line if that blood curse was pronounced? And you would imagine that when God pronounced this curse, there was celebration in the evil Elohim realm, saying, yep, God has just legally put himself in a bind, because Jesus his Messiah has to be from the royal line. He has to have the royal lineage. But Jeconiah just was blood cursed and said that none of his descendants would ever be king. So how could Jesus be king? Well, because Joseph was only his legal father. He was not from the bloodline of Joseph. So what about the one in Luke? Well, the genealogy in Luke, I think, was God was saying, hey, I'm going to do an end around. I'm going to do a little counterintelligence strategy here, because the one who was called Joseph's father was actually his father-in-law. That was Mary's father. When you look at it, and the reason why he could say that was because once you're married, you're one flesh. So Joseph did have two dads. His biological father and Mary's father were both considered his father. Interesting. And so with Mary's line, Mary is also a descendant of David, but not through the royal line. If you go through it, Joseph's lineage goes through the line of Solomon. Solomon was part of the royal line, but David had other sons. And one of his other sons, who was not in the royal line, was Nathan. Mary's genealogy goes through Nathan. So his biological mother, Mary, was a descendant of David, but not through the royal line. So that's how Jesus could be both. Jesus could be a son of David through Mary, but have the legal right to be king through Joseph. But because he's not of Joseph's biological line, he's not subject to the blood curse. So that was God basically running an end around on the evil Elohim, saying, yeah, you guys thought you had me. You don't. That's why they're two different genealogies. Matthew is showing that Jesus has a legal claim to be king. Mary is showing that he has the claim to be king without being a part of the blood curse on Jehoiakim or Jeconiah. That's why they're two different genealogies.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is
whoa. Crazy. Yeah, that's something I often wonder about.
And that's something I learned from Chuck Missler. I can't take credit for that.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, though.
Yeah,
I mean, your father-in-law is your father-in-law, father-in-law. Yeah, so yeah, that checks out. That tracks.
That's like she is the perfect person to do this. They were the perfect people to do that. He knew exactly.
You know why I think one of the reasons I think God did that blood curse. Well, of course, Jeconiah deserved it, but I think he was kind of doing almost a rope-a-dope with the Elohim realm. But they're like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about this anymore. The royal line is cursed. We're good. You say, oh, but then they didn't realize that God said, yeah, I still got you.
That is kind of cool.
I'm glad. Who asked that?
Il Didamondo.
Shout out Il Didamondo. That was a great question. That was fascinating. I never even thought about that.
Glad you asked that. Yeah.
I wonder if that has anything to do with why the Jews track Judaism, or who is a Jew through the mother rather than the father's lineage. I wonder if it has anything to do with that kind of that logic laid out there.
Interesting.
I'm gonna think.
Good question. I'm not sure about that. That's something you have to look into that. But that's a good question. I've heard that, but I've never really done a deep dive into why it's the mother's line. I mean, maybe it's because the baby's carried by the mother, so it's I don't know. I don't know.
And I want to go back to something about
really quick with Jesus as well. Like he wouldn't even be Joseph's son in a way, because he has no real genetics tied to that. No. I don't know. It's just very confusing.
It's his legal father. I mean, it's like basically Joseph adopted Jesus, if you want to look at it
Guardian.
that way. If you look at it in our modern terms, like if you adopt a kid, yeah, that's your son legally, but doesn't have any of your genetics. But he has a legal right to everything that you have as your adopted child.
It's almost like it gives a little bit new meaning to that, like when they say that the Gentiles are grafted in.
Yeah, we're adopted into the family.
Grafted onto the vine.
Yeah, but we have all the legal rights.
Well,
But
people
we also
use
aren't
that.
subject to the curses that God put onto the Jews for disobedience.
This is the same exact thing.
Nice.
Deuteronomy 28 is when he talks about all the curses for disobedience. So we're not subject to those, which is why it's so funny to me that everyone wants to be all like a lot of Gentile Christians say, oh no, we're the real Jews. I'm like, yeah, you don't really want that. Be the church. The promises of the church are way better than the promises to Israel. So these whole 10 lost tribes people, I'm like, why do you want to be a Jew?
Right,
when you can be
right.
the church.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same exact story as what you just described with Mary, the bloodline being cursed, but like this skirting around it? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's weird. All right, I really got to think about that. What were you going to say, David? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say back on the topic of baptism, I was looking at Romans 10, 9 through 10, and the idea of confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe it in your heart. So obviously there's scripture where Jesus talks about like, you confess it with your mouth, but I'm not your Lord, because it's only in your mouth that you say these things. But there does seem to be some real importance if it's in your heart. The proclamation, like an out loud proclamation to people, is something that is meaningful. And so I wonder if that is the spiritual significance, because we talk about how, getting baptized is sort of a spiritual declaration. In the church, or at least when I got baptized, they were showing us scripture from John that said that, you do it the way Jesus did it. You get baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so that is like this verbal declaration, and it has spiritual implications. But then if you look at Romans 9 through 10, or 10, 9 through 10, it's saying the importance of confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believing it in your heart. So It's like these things work in tandem. It just basically bolsters the idea that, this is a spiritual declaration in front of people. Because I was wondering, like, you were saying when you get saved, it's accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and you can sort of do that privately, right? Like if you have this epiphanous moment and you go like, oh, this is, and then that leads you to make this outward proclamation. But like, I wonder what it is. Like if you say it with your mouth and you're alone, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting caught up on this idea of like saying it with your mouth and you're alone versus saying it and it entering the ears and hearts of other people, and the way they then perceive you and how you identify who you're aligned with is more impactful. You know what I mean?
It is, because no one can hear your heart, obviously. So you can confess it with your mouth, but you have to believe, and that people can't hear that, but you have to believe it in your heart as well. And that may not be the exact order. Maybe you believe it in your heart first. Then you tell someone, you know what, I confess Jesus and I'm a Christian now. So you've just confessed him with your mouth. And so in the baptism thing, again, it's an outward symbol. I had a pastor when I was growing up. He preached about this all the time, that, just being baptized doesn't save you. His little joke was, if you get baptized without believing, he's like, you go down a dry devil, come up a wet devil. It doesn't matter. Right. And then as far as just confessing Jesus without having it in your heart, there's like the really funny story in the book of Acts about the 7 sons of Sceva who tried to cast out a demon. And they went into the demon's house and they said, we cast you out in the name of the Jesus who Paul preaches. And the demon said, Jesus I know, Paul I know, but who are you? Then he jumps on them, beats the crap out of them, tears their clothes off, and they run out of the house naked. Why? Because they said, Jesus, but they didn't believe him in their heart.
It's like I'm saying, like
they were LARPing.
Like they heard that it works, so they go like, that guy that like you guys had to bend the knee to last time, that dude, because that's gonna work again, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. Funny. So I know Jesus, I know Paul, but I don't know you.
Yeah,
interesting, very interesting. All right.
We gotta. I know you don't have that much more time with us.
Yeah, I've got about another 20-ish minutes.
Okay, cool.
Oh, okay, all right. All right. So Blappity Blap Blap asks, just bear with us here, Ed. I'm sorry. What are your thoughts on 2 Kings 3:27, referring to the king of Moab fighting against the Israelites? It says, then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. The fury against Israel was great. they withdrew and returned to their own land.
Shout out Blappity Blap Blap.
That blood sacrifice has spiritual consequences. And when he sacrificed his son, was it the right thing to do? No. One thing people have to keep in mind is that just because the Bible documents something doesn't mean God approves of it. There was this thing I saw on YouTube a few weeks ago about this lady who was, I think she's on like the Glenn Beck show or whatever. She did like the whole 20 questions thing where, it's this popular thing on YouTube where someone has to answer a question from 20 different people. I know she did.
Oh, yeah, Stucky Bethley.
Yeah, something like that.
Or something like that. Yeah, so
Candace Owens did it with a bunch of feminists. Patrick Beck David, who I'm still sketchy on, he did with a bunch of anti-capitalists, and she did with a bunch of so-called progressive Christians. And they were talking about marriage, and half of them were gay, and they were talking about how I'm married to my partner and we love each other, blah blah blah. And one of the things they said was, she said, marriage is between one man and one woman. And they said, well, what about some of the kings of Israel who had multiple wives, like Solomon, who had hundreds of wives, and King David had hundreds of wives? And so, if that's okay, how can you say marriage is between one man and one woman when you have these people in the Bible who had multiple wives? Well, just because something's recorded in the Bible doesn't mean God approved of it. All these people who had multiple wives, it always ended in disaster. Solomon's wives turned him away from God. David's multiple wives, they turned him away. They never ended well when you have multiple wives, because it is intended to be one person. So one man, one woman. So just because the sacrifice of this Moabite king's child happened, it didn't mean God approved of it. It's just documenting it, and it's showing that yes, the reason that these pagans and these evil people sacrifice children is not just because they have a bloodlust. They do. But it's because it actually does bring about spiritual power. It does do it. And what it also was saying that the Israelites were not in line with God, because if they were, that sacrifice wouldn't.
Sorry,
it's insinuated that it's in the Borat voice, like my wives. King David's saying my wives.
So basically, doing that sacrifice did imbue them with extra power, and that caused them to overcome the Israelites, because they weren't right with God. If they were right with Jehovah, then it wouldn't. Then the power within us, and this is the whole thing with spiritual warfare. The power we have in us through Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, is vastly more powerful than any spiritual evil. But if you're not in line with it, then spiritual evil can actually overcome you. So that's what happened there.
People will often do that, though. They'll be like, look at this character in the Bible. They did this horrifying thing or that horrifying thing. It's like you're dealing with severely imperfect people.
Right.
And that's a really consistent theme throughout the Bible, is that, you're dealing with sinners, and God uses broken people. And there's stories of redemption and the changing of people's hearts and them falling away again. Or it's like this idea that you can point to a character in the Bible who does a thing that's immoral or whatever, and use that as an example of maybe it's not so bad to do that thing. It's ridiculous.
I mean, we talked about David before. King David, he saw Bathsheba, he had sex with her, and she got pregnant. What happened to that baby? It was stillborn. So yes, he did it, and David was a man after God's own heart, because they were in alignment. But David was not perfect. He sinned a lot. And this was a sin. It was a consequence. So when you see something happen in the Bible and you're not sure if it's good or bad, look at the consequences. The consequences of David basically being a murderer because he had her real husband killed. He put him in the front lines. That had to be justice. And that baby was stillborn because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, speaking of David, we have another question. Do you watch The House of David? Does he think it's Jewish propaganda? I watch The House of David. Greg asked this.
You should answer, because I haven't watched it. It's on my list, but I don't watch much TV. My wife wants to watch it, and we will eventually. It just we're way backed up in like all of the shows we want to watch.
I've watched it, and I'm caught up with it. Actually, I enjoy it. I think it's good. I think they take like most of these biblical or Christian shows, they take liberties, because the Bible is like, he was here, then he was here, and it's like years later.
So you got to fill in some of the...
Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it for what it is.
When they did the battle, and everybody knows how that goes. and David's fighting Goliath, you could see where some of the liberties are taken, where he's like,
he does a spin.
He's zigzagging past the spears, and
does he have nunchucks or anything?
He doesn't have nunchucks. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
But I don't have.
Matt would say, read the Bible.
Just read the Bible.
Just open up your Bible.
Straight Bible.
Straight Bible. Just read the Bible. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Most of you guys are LARPing. You're out here with the Kardashians and Justin Bieber's
on the tweeter.
Yeah. Yeah. Read the Bible. But it's fun. For me, the stories like that and The Chosen, the shows like that make it come to life a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a hard time with my imagination, like making this stuff come to life, and I think they do a really good job. Like specifically, let's say in The Chosen, when they're in Jerusalem for the holiday, where Jesus gets killed. It's hard for me to understand when there's like the Bible's like there's a lot of people in the city at this time. It's filled, and you're like, yes, what's that mean? But they do a good job of like, oh, it's bustling. They're like, you can't walk. And you kind of understand how like Jesus could kind of get away from people in this big place, and it would be hard if nobody looks like it's like that. These logistical parts of it make a lot of sense, and
if you could add that historical cultural context in, flesh out what a place looked like, what the atmosphere might have been, it helps a lot.
Even with the story with what is this called, the House of David. Mm-hmm. What I think they do good is like the battles. Like the Bible's like, then there was a great battle, and they killed like mad people. And then they took over the land. And you're like, okay, next verse. But it's like, no, they're showing you then there was a battle. And I think it's cool. These dudes are out there with swords. And
I thought what was really cool was being able to see like, what 200 foreskins looks like.
No, we're not up to that part yet.
They didn't do that. We're head left.
Hey, we already had our show on foreskins, so I'm not going there.
I want to ask you something real quick too. I know I keep going back to this, but obviously I just got baptized recently, so the fact that it came up is fascinating to me. And Matt was talking about afterwards. He was like, yeah, like Exodus when they part the Red Sea and Pharaoh's on the other side, and then after they get across the water, the water collapses back into itself. It takes out Pharaoh and his army, and then there are remainder of enemies on that side. So old enemies are now on that side of the water, metaphorically, but there are new enemies that will be on the other side. And so he's talking about that within the context of baptism. And then that water theme is very interesting. I saw somebody in one of the chats earlier say this idea of killing off the Nephilim in the flood. Mm-hmm. And then, baptism being partly an exorcism, at least in Orthodoxy.
I asked Pastor Rick about that, and he was like, we don't look at it as this. And then he kind of went on to explain about like the washing out of the old and the ceremony of like the renewing of the earth. And I was like, what happened with that, right? And he's like, well, yeah, I guess we could look at it like that too. But he wasn't ready, because I guess in the modern church, like they want to give you the more flowery stuff.
Yeah.
And I get that, because most people don't want to talk about this, but I was like, nah, dude, let's talk about the Nephilim. And
that's a fascinating angle to look at. Like you being baptized in water and shedding, these potentially entities.
Well, if you look at it, the water has been used consistently in the Bible as a punishment for spiritual evil. You can go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, where, I believe, and we've talked about this before, where I believe there's a primordial rebellion, and beforehand, because he didn't create the world chaotic, tohu vabohu, which we see in Isaiah. He says, I didn't create it that way, meaning that something happened. So that's where we put an angelic rebellion. And what was that? There was water everywhere. Water was part of that judgment. And then he had to do, get rid of the water and then bring forth, or divide the waters up and bring forth the land, so that we could have life. And then of course the Nephilim getting destroyed in the flood, and then Pharaoh's army. But also remember that when the Jews entered the Israelites entered the Promised Land, they crossed the Jordan River. There was another one, and that's where John the Baptist was baptizing people, because the Jordan River also represented, because they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because they were screwing up. So, and they were still worshiping these idols. So they had to basically be baptized again through the Jordan River to leave the evil behind them and go into the Promised Land. So that was another crossing of the water. And then, of course, that's where John the Baptist was baptizing people, in that same river.
That's fascinating. It acts almost like a barrier for entry. Like to come in here, you got to leave this behind, and it's like you have to cross over this river anyway. So like get washed in it. Wash away these sins. That's fascinating.
It's even more
and
fascinating.
entities abound there. And in the Euphrates, you see in Revelation, there were
Yes.
angels bound in the Euphrates River.
Have you guys
There
ever
is
seen the
something-
movie Signs?
Yeah. Oh,
A
they
long
didn't
time
like
ago.
water.
Have you seen that with Mel Gibson, Ed?
Yeah, I saw it. It was long. I think I saw it when it first came out. So I was like,
Swing
ages
away,
ago.
Merle.
Yeah. So like, we don't know how
Yeah,
to defeat
water,
these
yeah.
aliens, and it just turns out that it's water. And I never
Yeah,
thought
like-
about it until now. It's like,
Interesting.
what
That's
do these people
cool.
know?
That's
What does Mel
cool.
Gibson know?
I don't know. Is he really that buff these days?
He's pretty buff these days.
Is he? Is he like old man rocked out?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm not mad at him. I need to do that.
He's pretty jacked.
very, very jacked. All right,
I'm just working on. I'm working on mastering my deep squats. I can't. I'm just.
Are you in the gym,
getting to
Ed?
the point where huh?
I said, are you in the gym, Ed?
Not as much as I should be. I'm working on like mobility right now, and there's this. And I was told by my chiropractor today, the main thing I should do is like get comfortable with just being in a deep squat, like on the regular, and this
Yeah.
like really healthy as you age. He said doing deep squats and also like hanging, like I have a pull-up bar in the garage, and do pull-ups, but she said just hang there. That's going to help your shoulder mobility, your spine, and all those sorts of things. So
That's a good idea.
She wants me to do that and get like all my mobility back and then start lifting, because if you do that, otherwise you're going to start getting tight. So
Yeah.
the goal is to, be able to, get in deep squat and be there for like several minutes. And that opens up the hip mobility, and you can start doing squats and stuff like that.
I've unfortunately gotten to the age finally where if I don't warm up before I start lifting, I will tweak something.
Oh yeah.
And I just man.
Remember those days where you're like, warm up? What's
Warm
that?
up? Are you kidding me? You
He's
just
gonna
go
lift.
and do whatever the hell you want, and you'd immediately, now I
All
gotta.
right, we don't have that much more time with Ed, so we have two more quick
Okay.
questions. One's not a question. Schizophrenic says, no questions, just let Ed know he's appreciated. You're appreciated, Ed.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Schizo friend is appreciated. I like schizo.
He's going to come down and hang out at the shop one of these weeks.
Let's
he said.
go. Awesome.
And I guess the last question, and we could wrap it up here, is what is Ed's favorite book of the Bible?
Ooh.
This is a good question.
Wow.
Yeah.
I gotta pick one. I'm gonna cheat and pick 3.
What? That's not fair. All right,
I
fine,
know
go
it's
ahead.
totally
Go
not,
out.
but they're for very different reasons. And one is I love the book of Daniel. Daniel is like one of my favorite books because there's so much there about God's nature and also the nature of the spiritual realm and the Elohim. That's the greatest prophecy of Jesus is in chapter 9, the 70th week, the 70 weeks prophecy. It gets behind the scenes into what's going on in the spiritual realm with his vision of those 4 beasts, and talking about how they represent all the empires. And then chapter 10, where you have the battle between the angel who's coming down to give him a message, and he has to fight the prince of Persia. And then after that, he says, I've got to go back and fight this guy again. And then I've got to fight the prince of Greece. And that's letting you know that and again, the Greek Empire was like 200 years later. And so first of all, they knew that Greece would be the next major empire. And it's a spiritual battle going on behind the scenes, not just what's happening on the surface. And so what happens in the spiritual realm happens first, then it happens in the physical realm. So I love Daniel. The other one is the book of Romans, because if you ever the book of Romans is systematic theology. Paul starts at the very beginning and just explains Christianity. The first 8 chapters of the book of Romans is the greatest explanation of the Christian faith that you're ever going to find. It starts with original sin and goes all the way to salvation and why it's important. So I love that. And of course, so I guess if you want to nail me down, my favorite book is Revelation. I just dig, and I've done a whole series on it. So I guess my favorite book would be Revelation. An honorable mention goes to Daniel and Romans. And the reason I love Revelation is because it helps you understand, first of all, because you have to know the rest of the Bible in order to understand Revelation. And it's the last chapter. It's the grand finale. It's the final lightsaber duel. It's the end of every good movie has that climactic scene where everything comes together and the hero gets what he wants. And the Revelations, at the end of Revelation, God gets what he wants in the end.
I never understood people who said, like, there's a lot of people, like devout Christians, who go, I don't really care too much about the book of Revelation. I'm not an end times guy. I'm like, how could you not be?
Not an end times guy.
It is God's telling you his story, and that's the part where you go. There's a part in the Stephen King book where he goes, before you end this story, The Dark Tower, he goes, you could stop here and just be happy with the journey, or you could turn the page and finish the story, and everybody finishes the story. I was like, how could you? This is the end of the story. Like, this is the part And
This is the
people
part of
just
the
like,
story that you're in. We are in that.
Yeah,
I
you're
think
part of it.
I believe we're in the church age, so we're in that chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation. We're in the church age, and then why wouldn't you want to know what's going to happen next,
Right.
in the world? The reason people don't get into it, because it's a tough read. I mean, that's why I did 60 bloody episodes on it.
Yeah,
And even then, I still think I just only scratched the surface. It's very complex, and some people just don't. They want to read the Beatitudes. Blessed are they who do this, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. And the parables are great, but some people just don't want to take that deeper dive. It takes a lot of effort to understand Revelation, and if you don't want to put forth the effort, then you're like, I don't care about that. It's weird. It's like people don't like conspiracies. What's wrong with you?
yeah, get out of here.
Well, here's a weird conspiracy. I have a weird conspiracy. I can't help it. I just notice patterns. We go through Revelation with Ed. We go through the book of Daniel with Matt. Ed says bloody, which is like a kind of an English
and Matt
thing.
says wanker.
What the heck is going
Guys,
on?
these got like British spies or something.
That's weird, dude.
No, if you
Weird.
okay, here's something I'm going to say that's it's not very kind, but I've never really liked Brits that much. I don't know what it is about Brits. It just
a widely
I've never had a good
accepted
experience.
thing.
It's so funny. When I was talking to when I was a couple months ago, when I was talking to Merkel, he flew me out there to talk to him. We both have that in common. Totally off the cuff. He's like, you know what? I just can't stand Brits. I'm like, me too.
Yo, me too.
Not into him.
Me too.
Here's the thing.
Zero
And I will
respect.
acquiesce that because every interaction I've had with a Brit, they've been an a-hole. Now, I will totally admit that maybe like 95% of Brits are wonderful people, and I've just by sheer luck only run into the 5% that are wankers.
You know what? Here's the reality. Ed.
Wankers.
I don't deal with losers.
And they're big losers.
They just lose. Like when I look at them, I just go 1776. You know, what are we talking about here?
They're bad losers too.
No, they're good. They're good. Just stay over there.
Well, I mean, like, you lose and you have some like, hey, good game. There's
They
none of
lost. Like they lost dentistry and like.
that. They just keep making
I don't
bad
know.
food.
Okay,
Well, here's the other thing about
our-
Brits, real quick. How come? Why are all of our actors Brits? I mean, Spider-Man's a Brit. Superman was
I don't
a
like
Brit.
that.
I'm like,
I don't like
did
that
we
either.
run out of American actors?
the guy from House, the guy from
Yes.
The Walking Dead is British.
Is Christian Bale British?
Honestly,
is.
they might be. See what I mean?
No, Christian Bale's a Brit.
Why are they trying
So-
to take like super people and make them like British people are far from super, like genetically speaking, they're a mess. The teeth thing, the everything.
And also, they put them with a different. This is like we've gone off the road. They
No,
put them
let's-
with a different accent. Rick Grimes has a British accent.
And they put them in a country accent.
Yeah, what are you doing? We got country people here.
We have plenty of country.
You wouldn't hire me to do a British accent for a British role.
No.
Makes no sense.
I mean, you have an island the size of what? Like, I don't know, maybe it's the size of not even New York, maybe Virginia or something. And you have this whole country, and you can't come. It's so weird when you're hearing an actor, you know, they're doing their thing on stage or whatever, and then you hear them interviewed, and like, and they have the accent. I'm like, you're a Brit too?
Yeah.
Always disappointed. I think we should bomb them.
No, my God, David. David, no.
But all that to say, I just say bloody because I don't want to. I'm trying not to use profanity. Not that
I've been
profanity
working on that
it's
too.
not, but it can be a stumbling block. That's why I don't
can be,
use
yes.
profanity on Faith by Reason. Not because I don't use it in real life. Drive with me, and you will hear me cursing like a sailor. But I don't want it to be a stumbling block to certain people who believe that it's wrong to curse. So I just like Paul said, I don't eat meat sacrificed to idols because it's gonna be a stumbling block. I try my best not to use profanity when I'm talking on a show about Christ. Just that reason.
that's
And
fair.
I've been trying, Ed.
I'm not so good at it. I was
David
doing the
is.
Raven the other day, and I was saying some choice words, but I'm reeling it in. I'm getting better.
I think I've been doing better. I do the editing on it, and I look. We look at the slurs.
and you could see it
And
used
I
to be
have
like
a
32
tally.
times.
I count them. I said David did that one. But all right, we got to get
that's
Ed
not
out of
true,
here.
dude. All right, Ed.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for joining us. One more time before you get out of here, though. Where can everybody find your work?
you can find me on faithbyreason.net. You can read the stuff there for free. A lot of stuff is going behind the paywall there, and if you go behind the paywall, you can get the discounts on the books. You can get all the Revelation series. When I do the spiritual warfare class, it's going to be you got access to it if you want to pay through Patreon as well. But it'll be through this because it's through WordPress. So I'll be using their membership stuff there to have the course available because it's a little easier doing it on Patreon. So you have access to that there.
Wonderful.
And so on Patreon at Faith by Reason, patreon.com/Faith by Reason. That's where you get the Q&As and you get content dropping there first, and the Revelation series and the Bible study and all that great stuff. And I have to do one more thing. There are different tiers of Patreons, And one of the things I promised for my people who are my patrons who are at the higher tier, I said I will start giving them shout outs. So do a quick shout out to my upper tier Patreons. That's Alex, Trevor Erno, Contra, and Nishi Group. Those folks are supporting me at a higher level. I really appreciate the support. And if you want to get a shout out here and on some of my other stuff, hey,
look at Ed's tears.
Go to the different tiers.
Appreciation, benefactor, and then he goes in the cornerstone. He's like sugar daddy
Sugar
tiers.
daddy
I love it.
Yeah, if you go to that level, I will call you. I will refer to you as sugar daddy or sugar mama on every.
We have a daddy tier.
Yeah, we got one too. We got a daddy tier and a mommy tier.
And at
Ed,
the
you're a wild man.
level, yeah, and at one of the levels I give you, signed copies of my book. I actually need to send those out pretty soon. I got to sign those and mail them to those folks. So yeah, it's just some people have asked, we want to support you more. I'm like, oh yeah, great, yeah, I will give you the opportunity to do that, and I will try to give you something a little special. And if you're at the cornerstone tier, then we get a monthly one-on-one with me where we'll just talk about whatever we want to talk about.
By the way,
excellent.
on the way out, 75%, it held strong. A lot more votes, but it held strong. 75% of the dangerous retards say no, Christians should not celebrate
Ed,
Halloween.
you're gonna have to get
Ed's
your
take.
sour candies at the store, Ed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You got to know
I
your
gotta
own
start
path, though. You got to know where you are as a Christian. That's what
Don't
it is.
do it. If you don't want to do it, then absolutely. All 75% of you don't. Absolutely not. And there's no problem with that. Like I said, if you are doing it and you're just having fun, don't feel guilty. But if you don't want to do it, then do not.
All right. You
It's
guys
been an
heard
awesome Halloween episode. Ed, thanks again. Always a blessing when you come on. And I'm encouraged. I see the fact that you've opened up the tiers means that people have asked and means that they're supporting you. And that is awesome.
That is awesome.
It's yeah, dude. Yeah, you can only open the thing up and show the people, but they are the ones that have to choose it, and they're choosing correctly. So
Yeah.
good
Some
for
of them,
them.
and like I said, I offered it at that the $100 tier that you get an hour with something like an hour 45 minutes, whatever, and they want the time. And I've actually had that with folks. I'm like, hey, thank you, I appreciate it. And I will be happy to spend time with you directly and talk about whatever you want to talk about. There's been some questions, some spiritual warfare stuff, and I appreciate you valuing my time. And so, yeah, if you want to do that, then join that tier. If you don't, join whatever you want to do.
Onward and upward. I think only good things are coming soon.
By the way, guys,
Yeah.
Blappy Halloween.
Oh, Blappy Halloween. And we will see you probably sometimes next week. Don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. Goodbye, guys.